How much is your life worth? I'm not talking about sentimental value, memories, or the love of the people around you. I'm talking about numbers, money, how much someone would be willing to pay or receive to decide whether you live or die. It seems absurd, doesn't it? But what you're about to discover may completely change how you see power, trust, and even love. There's a place where silence weighs more than any word. Where machines breathe for you, where doctors decide your fate in seconds, and where your life may be in the hands of someone you never imagined. That place is the ICU, and when money, ambition, and secrets enter this scenario, the result can be devastating. Have you ever stopped to think about what really happens behind those locked doors? About the decisions that are made while you are unconscious, vulnerable, completely at the mercy of others. The story I'm going to tell you today happened to a man who controlled everything. Roberto Tavares was the kind of person who never heard the word no, a millionaire businessman, influential, feared and respected in equal measure. He built an empire from scratch, crushed competitors, closed billion-dollar deals, and always came out on top. But there's one thing his money couldn't buy: protection against his own fragility. And when he was admitted to that ICU one August morning, he discovered in the worst possible way that not everyone around him was rooting for his survival. Because while Roberto struggled to breathe, connected to tubes and wires, surrounded by monitors that beeped incessantly, someone very close to him was making a different kind of calculation. It wasn't about saving him. It was about how much time he had left, about how much it was worth waiting, about what life would be like without him. Stay with me until the end, because what happened in that ICU goes far beyond a simple hospitalization. In the midst of this silent chaos, there was a woman, Clara, a nurse, dedicated, invisible to most important people, but not to Roberto. She was the only person who saw him as a human being, not as a bank account. They met months before, far from the spotlight, far from power. It was an unlikely, almost impossible encounter. He accustomed to commanding, she accustomed to caring. And between cheap coffees and unpretentious conversations, something was born that neither of them expected, a real connection. But fate has a cruel sense of irony, because it was Clara who was on duty that night. She was the one who held Roberto's hand while he was suffocating. She was the one who promised he would be all right. And she was the one who, days later, discovered the darkest truth any ICU could hide. A truth that would place her before the most difficult choice of her life: to save the man she loved or to protect her own existence. Have you ever been through this? Have you ever had to choose between doing the right thing and protecting yourself? Because what Clara discovered in that hospital wasn't just about Roberto. It was about how far human greed can go when no one is watching. It was about how much a life is worth when money is involved. And above all, it was about the price of silence. What you're about to discover will make you question everything. Who do you trust? Who truly roots for you when you're most vulnerable? And most importantly, what would you do if you found out that someone close to you was profiting from your potential death? Before we continue, I need to ask you something. If this story is affecting you, if it has somehow made you stop and reflect on trust, on the people around you, or on difficult choices you've had to make in life, leave a comment below about what has touched you the most so far. It could be a personal experience, a question, a feeling. I read every comment, and often it's through them that I understand what really matters to the person on the other side of the screen. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you're enjoying this type of content, stories that go beyond superficial entertainment, that make you think and truly feel, leave a like. It may seem like a small thing, but it's this simple gesture that shows the algorithm that it's worth sharing this video with more people. That's how we build a community of people who enjoy deep, intense content, who aren't afraid to face life's uncomfortable truths. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, now's the time. Your participation here is what makes this work grow. It's what gives me the strength to continue researching, writing scripts, and bringing you stories like this every week. When you subscribe, you're not just pressing a button. You're saying that this kind of reflection matters, that you want to continue exploring the more complex sides of human nature. And I promise I won't waste your trust. Now let's go back to the ICU, because what Clara was about to discover went far beyond anything she could have imagined. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there's a hidden truth about power that most people never realize until they're lying in that hospital bed. Roberto Tavares spent his days leading meetings in mahogany rooms, signing multi-million-dollar contracts, deciding the future of entire companies with a stroke of the pen. He was the kind of man who never waited. People waited for him. Secretaries organized his schedule minute by minute. Drivers anticipated his every move. Security guards opened doors before he even got close. Everything in his life was choreographed to reinforce a single message. He had total control. But in that ICU, the scene was brutally different. The constant beeping of the heart monitors marked each heartbeat as if it were a countdown. Doctors came and went with expressions Roberto couldn't decipher. Nurses adjusted tubes, checked dosages, and wrote numbers on clipboards without looking him in the eye. He tried to speak, but the tube in his throat turned his words into muffled, desperate sounds. For the first time in decades, Roberto Tavares was invisible. Just another fragile body dependent on machines to stay alive. And the silence in that room was deafening. It wasn't the absence of sound. It was something different. It was a silence heavy with tension, the kind you feel physically in your chest. The glances exchanged between the doctors said more than any words. Something was wrong there, something that went beyond the official diagnosis, and Roberto, even without being able to articulate a sentence, felt it in his soul. But to understand the weight of this silence, we need to go back a few months in time, because there's a layer to this story that transforms everything. A journey that began in the most unlikely place possible, a simple, unglamorous corner cafe where nobody knew the surname Tavares. It was there that Roberto met Clara. She was on her break from her shift, her uniform wrinkled, with deep, dark circles under her eyes from working double shifts to pay the bills. He had only gone in to escape an annoying work call. They sat at the same table by chance, because the cafe was packed. And for the first time in years, Roberto had a real conversation. Without ulterior motives, without disguised proposals, without anyone wanting anything from him other than to exchange a few sincere words about life. Clara had no idea who he was. She wasn't impressed when he mentioned he worked in business. She didn't change her tone of voice, didn't widen her eyes, didn't start asking those self-serving questions Roberto was used to hearing. She just laughed. She talked about the patients she cared for, about her mother who lived in the countryside, about how difficult but rewarding it was to save lives every day. And Roberto, for the first time, felt seen as a person, not as property. They began meeting in secret, not because it was forbidden, but because they both knew it was too fragile to survive the backstage world of Roberto. She was afraid of being judged, of becoming gossip, of losing the essence of what was being born. He was afraid that the greed of others would contaminate the only refuge of humanity he still had. Because in Roberto's universe, love was a bargaining chip. Marriage was a partnership, and true feelings were seen as weakness. But with Clara, he could be weak. He could admit doubts, confess fears, exist without the armor of power, and that, for a man who controlled empires, was the most terrifying and valuable freedom he had ever experienced. And it was precisely because of this love that fate orchestrated its cruelest move. Because when Roberto was admitted to that ICU, struggling to breathe, his body slowly giving up, Clara was on duty. She held his hand while the medical team raced against time. She whispered in his ear that everything would be all right. She promised she wouldn't let anything happen. And at that moment, she truly believed it. But 3 days later, while checking Roberto's prescribed medication, Clara noticed something strange. The dosage didn't match the standard protocol. She checked again, thinking it might be a typo. She picked up the previous chart. Her heart began to race. Someone had altered the treatment. It wasn't carelessness. It was intentional. Subtle enough to seem natural, but lethal enough to ensure Roberto wouldn't leave that ICU alive. Clara sought out Dr. Mendez, the team coordinator. He looked away. Don't get involved in this, Clara. You don't understand how things work around here. But she did understand. She understood perfectly. That same night, unable to sleep, she did what any dedicated nurse would do. She investigated. She discreetly accessed the hospital's administrative files. And what she found shattered any remaining illusions: bank transfers. 2 million reais deposited into an offshore account linked to the hospital director, Senator Simon Tavares, Roberto's wife. The plan was frighteningly simple. Let Roberto die naturally, without raising suspicion, without legal disputes, without complications. Just inherit the empire and move on. And the medical team, those who swore to save lives, had been bought to carry out this silent assassination. Clara felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. The hidden truth behind that ICU was darker than any medical decision. It was betrayal, greed, and calculated coldness disguised as care. Now I need to show you. The hardest part of this story, because the truth never comes alone. It always brings consequences. Clara spent that entire night sitting in the empty hospital locker room, staring at the wall, trying to process the moral weight of the decision she faced. She knew that a single phone call to the police or the press, could save Roberto. But she also knew that people like Simon don't fall easily. They have lawyers, influence, enough power to destroy anyone who gets in their way. And Clara, she only had the truth, and the truth alone almost never wins when facing money and power. But when she returned to the ICU room and saw Roberto there, connected to the machines, breathing with difficulty, completely vulnerable, something changed inside her. She remembered the conversations at the cafe, the sincere smiles, the way he looked at her as if she were truly seen, not just another piece on the chessboard of his life. That's when Clara made the riskiest decision of her life. She adjusted the medication back to the correct protocol. She secretly documented everything. She photographed the altered prescriptions, copied the bank transfer records, recorded the conversation with Dr. Mendez, and she sent everything to a human rights lawyer she knew from an NGO. 3 days later, the bomb exploded. Headlines in all the newspapers. Police raiding the hospital. Simon being arrested. Dr. Mendez removed from his position. Roberto woke up a week later, confused, disoriented, but alive. And when he finally managed to speak, his first question was, "Where's Clara?" But she had disappeared. She resigned. She left only a note, "You deserve to live. But I don't deserve your forgiveness," because Clara carried a secret that no one knew. She had discovered Simon's plan 2 weeks earlier. She remained silent, she hesitated, and she only acted when she realized she truly loved Roberto. But there's something about the impact of our decisions that we only understand when we go through a real transformation. Roberto took months to recover physically. The doctors said he was lucky, but he knew it wasn't luck. It was Clara, and the stronger he became, the more her absence hurt. He had lost everything: his wife, his confidence, the illusion that he controlled his own destiny. But for the first time in his life, Roberto felt free. Free from the burden of maintaining appearances. Free from the prison he himself had built around his life. He used his influence in a way he never had before. He denounced corruption in the healthcare system, funded reforms in public hospitals, and created protection funds for professionals who reported medical crimes. He became a fierce defender of transparency and ethics, but none of that filled the void. Because he needed one thing: to find Clara and tell her that she didn't have to carry that guilt alone. It took 4 months of searching. She was working at a community clinic in a small town in the countryside when Roberto appeared at the door. Clara froze. "I should have acted sooner." she said, her eyes welling up with tears. I knew, and I stayed silent. I almost let you die. Roberto stepped forward. You saved me. It doesn't matter when. You chose to do the right thing when it was hardest. And that changed everything. And now Claire asked, her voice trembling. Now I want to learn how to truly live, Roberto replied. And I want you to teach me. He didn't make grand promises. He didn't try to buy her forgiveness. He simply extended his hand. And for the first time since it all began, the silence between them wasn't one of fear, guilt, or secrets. It was one of new beginnings, of redemption built not with words, but with different choices. Look, if you've made it this far, I know this story has affected you in some way. And I wanted to ask a sincere question. What would you do in Clara's place? Would you report it immediately, even knowing the risks, or would you wait for the right moment? Carrying the weight of that decision, and Roberto, do you believe that money can truly buy second chances, or is true wealth found in the choices we make when everything falls apart? I read every comment that comes here, and often it's these conversations that show me how much these stories matter. So if you've stayed with me until the end, leave a comment saying, "This story stayed with me." I want to know what touched you the most, what made you think, or even if you've ever been in a similar situation where you had to choose between doing the right thing and protecting yourself. And if you've noticed that the content here isn't just empty entertainment, that we truly delve into stories that make you reflect on trust, power, redemption, and humanity, then leave a like. It's this simple gesture that shows it's worthwhile to continue bringing this kind of content, which goes beyond the surface and truly touches on what matters. If you're not already subscribed, I invite you to join this community. Every week there are intense stories like this one, exploring the more complex sides of human nature. And your presence here makes all the difference in this journey we're building together. There's a video over here that will show you another perspective on impossible choices and second chances. Click on it and continue the conversation with me there, because it doesn't end here.